a special edition of PFTPM, and the fact that it took us a little while to fire up the engine is reflective of how irrelevant the Tennessee Titans currently are with respect to the rest of the league. Because usually when there's a big move like the firing of a general manager, we activate pretty quickly to do a video. This time around, when the Titans fired GM Ran Carthon, we were just kind of like, okay, all right, well, let's just keep working. And then the light finally went off. We probably should do a video because it's a pretty big deal when a GM gets fired. But with the Titans, I don't know that anything qualifies as a big deal because most of the time I don't know what the Titans are doing. Earlier today, Devin McCourty and I discussed on PFT Live the importance of having a GM and a coach who are joined at the hip, their legs tied together, operating in a three-legged race with both falling or both running. Both go or both stay. Some teams, the teams that are dysfunctional, will fire the GM, keep the coach, hire a GM, fire the coach, fire the GM, which is exactly what the Titans have done over the last 3 years. John Robinson, the GM of the team, was fired during the 2022 season. Then Mike Vrabel was fired after Ran Carthon had been hired as the GM. Vrabel fired after 2023. Now after 2024, at a time when people were wondering whether or not Brian Callahan would be one and done in Tennessee, he's staying. Carthon is going. The Titans announced the move today, and it's confusing beyond the fact that the Titans have created a situation where the GM can blame the coach and the coach can blame the GM. I don't have enough talented players. They're not doing enough with the talented players I'm finding. That is a recipe for chronic dysfunction. And dysfunctional teams do dysfunctional things. And you look at the Titans. But for the fact that Mike Vrabel willed them to the number one seed a couple of years ago, they have been chronically dysfunctional under the ownership of Amy Adams Strunk. And they're not alone. There are, 10, 12 teams that continue to make bad decisions, continue to not operate the team effectively, continue to not be competitive, while also continuing to make a lot of money. That's another point Devin and I made today. For all the struggles of Shad Khan as owner of the Jacksonville Jaguars, he's got a $360 million yacht. Every year, the books are balanced. The black ink far outweighs the red. Maybe that's why it's the new de facto uniform for the owners to have the black T-shirt under the dress shirt. I was going to do that, but, I think you have to have at least $1 billion, and I figured out earlier today I would have to live 3,000 years at my current rate of pay to save $1 billion. But the black is the black ink that's everywhere for all 32 teams. There's no team that's losing money. No team has lost money. They'd have to try. It's Brewster's millions to try to lose money in the NFL. That's how well the teams are doing. So they're all winning, regardless of whether they're winning on the field. The Titans winning financially, getting that swanky new stadium. They got the deal done to get taxpayer money, et cetera, et cetera. Who cares if you win? Who cares if you're functional in the football operation? Now, they seem to be trying, but how effective is it going to be when you never press the reset button and just start over? Like the Jets are doing. Got to give them credit. Start over. Clean slate. No holdover. No second chance for the GM to get it right. We're not going to let a GM hire 3 coaches before we realize he might be the problem. So what the Titans are doing, and this is where it becomes even stranger, or at least more unconventional. Maybe it'll work. Chad Brinker came in as assistant GM at or about the time Carthon was hired. Last year, Brinker was promoted to president of football operations. Well, now what's going to happen, Brinker is inheriting final authority over all football decisions. So he's basically the GM, even though he's the president of football operations. The statement from the Tennessee Titans, and more accurately, the article, very lengthy and kind of confusing in its structure, article that's posted at the website, ultimately contains quotes from the team's CEO making it clear that Brinker will break ties with respect to the team's roster. And let me just stop there for a second. I don't like to think of it in terms of breaking ties because there shouldn't be ties that need to be broken. And when someone breaks a tie, that means someone's going to be upset with the outcome. The best organizations find a way to reach a consensus. There's never a winner or a loser. This isn't Judge Wapner going back into his chambers for 5 minutes and coming out and telling the coach and the GM who wins and who loses. So I don't like that phraseology. I don't like that vibe. There should never be ties to be broken. Everyone should be on the same page. And in the best organizations, everyone is. So Brinker is going to be in charge. He will be the final authority on all football matters, including the roster. Basically, they're looking for a director of scouting to hold the title of GM. It's not a GM job. It won't be a GM job. And here's where they're going to have a challenge. If they're looking for someone from another team, the fact that the GM won't carry final say could complicate the effort to take someone who's currently under contract. They might have to go outside of the industry, at least the current 32-team industry, like the 49ers had to do when they hired Kyle Shanahan, who ran the show. They had to go find a John Lynch to come in because they couldn't pluck a director of scouting or some other front office employee from another team who didn't have final say over the roster in the draft. So they're creating a unique situation on the fly. They're giving more power to Brinker. And this raises a question under the Rooney Rule. And I know that whenever you mention that phrase, there will be many eyes that roll. But here's the problem. It's a rule that's still on the books, and the NFL will defend it. And the NFL has shown no inclination to get rid of it. So it's like any other rule. It's like holding, pass interference, tampering, anything. The rule has to be respected. I've asked the league how the Rooney Rule factors into this decision to take the final authority over football decisions from the GM, give it to Chad Brinker, who's the president of football operations, was promoted into that job last year. I don't think there was a Rooney Rule compliant search. I've asked the league that as well, for Brinker to get that promotion. And there clearly was no search whatsoever for Brinker to get the authorities. Look, here's the reality. Like most other NFL rules, there are ways to creatively work around it. And it kind of feels like that's what the Titans did last year in moving Brinker up, and this year in giving Brinker the extra job duties. So moving forward, it's Brian Callahan as the coach, Chad Brinker as the guy who's in charge of the football operations, basically the GM, the de facto GM. I think I've said de facto 3 times. The over-under was 2.5, so cash your ticket. And then they're going to find a GM who isn't really a GM. He can tell friends and family. He can impress strangers by saying he's the general manager of the Tennessee Titans, but the general manager is Chad Brinker. But he's the president of football operations. He's the general manager with a better title, basically. He's got a swanky title and all the power as if he was the GM. And one of the things they say in the article, and it's true, different teams do it different ways. They're doing it their way. But the way the Titans have done things under Strunk's ownership have not gone well, but for the time that they had Vrabel as the head coach. And then they ran him off, which they shouldn't have done, as evidenced by the fact that every team with a coaching vacancy this year is going to try to get him. And he's probably going to land in New England. And they're probably going to be happy that he did. So we'll see what they do going forward. But if I was Brian Callahan, I would at least not buy in Tennessee. And if you did buy a house last year, I think about getting a realtor ready, because we know how this game is going. If the Titans are bad again next year, who's going to go? Well, the way that the pattern has unfolded for the Tennessee Titans the past few years, the coach is the one to go next. And then the new GM will hire the coach that GM wants to put in place. The only thing that could save Callahan is if Brinker, kind of behind the scenes, was the guy who picked Callahan last year. If Callahan is Brinker's guy, then they work together in collaboration with this glorified scout who will be the GM to build the kind of team they're looking for. And the stakes are high because they hold the first pick in the draft and in every other round. They earned it by being bad this year. And bad they've been. From the first seed in the AFC 2 years ago to the first overall pick. That's a quick disintegration of a team that was in Super Bowl contention not that long ago. We'll see how it goes for the Tennessee Titans. But like the Jaguars, they're in a division where the teams are bad. And if you're bad long enough, nobody pays attention to you anymore. And I'd say right now the 2 most irrelevant teams in the National Football League are the Jaguars and the Titans. They're competing for the top spot. One is looking for a coach, not a GM. One is looking for a GM, not a coach. And it's amazing to say that of the three, the Jets are the ones that have their act together because they're looking for both. They'll probably screw it up, but I'm sorry. Sorry, Woody. There's a chance they'll screw it up, but at least they're looking for both. Clean sweep, start over. And once you start over, the key is everybody's got the same accountability. Everybody goes or everybody stays. And when you have that attitude, like the Giants had, in keeping both Joe Schoen as GM and Brian Daboll as head coach, you're more likely to develop continuity. And you also erase the idea that if things are going bad, and it's going to happen every year for at least a third, if not half of the league. I mean, 14 teams make the playoffs, 18 don't. There's 4 or 5 teams that almost made the playoffs, and then there's the teams that were dead in the water. Those are the teams where the stress increases, and there's a temptation, if you're the coach, to blame the GM, and if you're the GM, to blame the coach. If you work for a team where it's clear that that isn't going to save your butt, then instead of figuring out how I can blame the failures of the team on someone else and save my job, you spend the time working together to save both, or both will be gone. So, in Tennessee, both aren't gone. Maybe next year, maybe the year after, but if anything, based on recent history, it's going to be new GM, then a new coach, then a new GM, then a new coach, and around we go until who knows when. Because at the end of the day, as far as the balance sheet matters, whether or not you've won 4 games or 14, it's the same result. Millions of profit flowing into the coffers. And under that standard, all 32 franchises are winning the Super Bowl every single year. Hi, it's Mike Florio. Thanks for watching PFT on YouTube. Hit subscribe for the latest news and analysis from Pro Football Talk.